Welcome to another edition of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I am here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Is stakeholder capitalism still important and necessary for Canadian businesses? Our next guest is Ian Robertson, a partner at the Jefferson Hawthorne Group, which is a strategic leadership advisory firm in Toronto. He'll take us through all the relevant issues. Welcome to Boom and Bust.
Thank you for having me.
I guess the first question for our audience would be, could you give us a definition of stakeholder capitalism and how and when it gripped corporate Canada?
Absolutely. So, for those not familiar, stakeholder capitalism is a concept that did not spring to mind from free market economists or entrepreneurs. The model was introduced initially in the late 70s and has really gained momentum in the last few years under the World Economic Forum. The model was introduced to replace the shareholder capitalism concept of the West and the state capitalism concept of the East with a third way that was supposed to balance profit with societal good to the benefit of all. To do this, corporate decisions needed to be placed under the watchful eye of a central authority that included government, civil society, international community, collectively known as stakeholders. And that's what's housed in the World Economic Forum today. For Canada, the real catalyst came after 2008 with the economic crisis. Bureaucrats, regulators felt that reins need to be put on what they viewed as the chaos and risks of the free market. And that really advanced a movement in Canada that catalyzed in 2019, where a group of 200 executives got together in New York and redefined the purpose of a corporation to benefit all of society and shareholders. The Trudeau government reflected that in the CBCA and broadened the governance requirements and fiduciary duty of directors in Canada to include not only shareholders, but this nebulous concept of broader long-term societal interests.
And so it's kind of embedded in our legislation that this is a requirement for corporate Canada to do this now.
Yes, absolutely. It's actually asking companies, if you think about it, you have CEOs who go to school, do their MBAs, and want to run a company. What in effect this does is it hands the responsibility of making ideological, social, and political decisions from politicians who couldn't accomplish those objectives of unity, societal benefit, over to corporations. So the way to think about this is it's a legislative tool that has extended the reach of government into corporations, using them as tools to drive societal progress in their mind.
Let's examine this a little bit more closely as well, Ian. I guess uh, in terms of examples of the manifestation of stakeholder capitalism, can you take us through DEI and ESG and some of these other things?
Sure. So I think the first thing to know when we're talking about these emotionally charged issues of ESG and DEI, I take a very dispassionate, factual economic view of these circumstances. And my concern is that the focus on these emotionally charged, value based arguments is focusing on the tree, not the entire forest. There's nothing wrong with stakeholders looking out for stakeholder interests, caring for your community, right? These are all obligations of any well functioning society. The problem is that that's been placed on businesses under the direction of government. And when people ask me about ESG and DEI, those are simply tools within the framework. But what those really expose for me is the first crack in the edifice of the stakeholder capitalism system, which was supposed to be its strength. And what I mean by that, it was supposed to achieve consensus,
Right.
but instead, by trying to satisfy everyone, they've satisfied no one. And that's why you see the backlash that's happening. I would also say that, we could talk about some of the socialist and central planning authoritarian ideologies that have helped influence stakeholder capitalism. But if you look at any one of those, there's a very clear pattern that for any of these central planning socialist models to work, you need to polarize your demographic between the perceived oppressed and the perceived oppressor, whether it's by economic, religious, social, or ideological lines. My concern when I look at this issue is that, the right, I think, has chosen the wrong battlefield by engaging with the left on the basis of moral and values. At the same time, I think the left has left themselves exposed on this because I think where this debate is going to go is not from morals and values, but one to economic competitiveness as the world polarizes. And if the world is really a question of simple economic viability, then what we think on these individual issues doesn't matter.
Interesting point. I do want to delve into that a little bit more closely. We're going to leave you just for a moment for our commercial break here. Ian, we'll be back with our guest after these commercial messages.